Hello and welcome to the Daily Atheist Morning Show. It is Monday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you, 2020. You've heard about that, right? Today is Star Wars Day. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it is Star Wars Day. If you're for the nerd in you. You're not on yet. They can't hear you. You're not on yet. I was going to introduce you. Let me introduce you. Daniel. There you go, Daniel. Now you're on. Daniel Fisk Bennett.
Your lack of faith disturbing.
Disturbing. There we go. Yes. Okay. Just the way the system works, they can't. There you go. Now we can see everybody. Daniel Fisk Bennett is my co-host today. He's the Assistant State Director in Washington for American Atheists and Facebook Group Master Extraordinaire. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning.
Yeah, tricky.
Jumped the gun.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's all right. We paid extra for that. Yeah. So
right.
And we also have special guest Miss Zara Kay. She's an ex-Muslim activist who has been on the front pages of The Australian, news.com.au, and Sky News, and who is the founder of Faithless Hijabi. Good morning, Miss Zara. How are you today?
Afternoon. I'm good, thanks.
That's right, it is, huh? She's somewhere, they want us to believe it's a round globe. Anyway, yes, you're in England, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So good afternoon. How are you doing today? Do you have a good weekend?
Not too bad. Yeah, I mean, it was a hectic weekend dealing with a lot of hateful messages, threats coming my way, specifically on Instagram. So I actually made a thread on Twitter, screenshotting all of them, even if I didn't reply to them. I made a thread on Twitter, and I think it was about 14 tweets long with 4 pages or 4 screenshots on each tweet. So there were like 40 messages at minimum, and I didn't even put all of them because I was just tired of taking screenshots. But yeah, it was an interesting weekend. I had to turn my profile private for a bit, screenshot it, and then turn it public again after I've pasted in all the screenshots, so that people know that, hey, you can't just message me in private, because I'm going to make it public, and that because you want me to respect your ideology by calling me names and asking me to shut up, that is exactly why I'm going to make it public, and people who don't know what you're doing as a Muslim asking me to respect it by threatening me will now be public. So you're actually being a detrimental effect. You're bringing a detrimental effect to the community and the religion, not me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was an interesting weekend. How was yours?
It was good. Not that interesting. Let me catch some folks up, okay, real quick. I'm going to say hi to the chat. Junk Shop Library, Godless Granny, good morning, everybody. Woolly Ignorant, Christy is here. Brainbug, good morning. All my favorites are here this morning. Hi, everybody. Thank you to Daniel for joining me and Miss Zara. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Miss Zara, I found her on Neil's show the other night, her deconversion story. And she is an ex-Muslim, and she helps other ex-Muslim women come out and be safe, and she fosters a safe community for them in the Faithless Hijabi. Now, apparently something happened last week, and this is why we were briefly discussing. Something happened last week that kind of made a shift for her, and it's been drawing a lot of negative attention. So do you want to catch us up into what happened and what's been happening since?
Yeah, so, well, just a bit of a background. A lot of my social media, evidently, is to grab attention, to talk to people, specifically women. So to talk to women and relate our stories to, same, like being faced on your abuse in different ways. Some of it is not very explicit. So a lot of my social media uses hashtags that basically captures people. And obviously the hashtags that I use are Ramadan, Haramadan. So haram is prohibited. So that's what I think a lot of ex-Muslims use to basically blaspheme, do everything that is prohibited in Ramadan, or whatever people want to do, actually, not everything. But yeah, so I started using those hashtags, and with Ramadan trending as well, I think somebody actually got a glimpse of it. But and she started messaging me, and this is a woman, which really surprised me. It really surprises me when women call other women sluts or bitches, and I'm like, there is a negative stigma associated with it, and that's exactly why you're using it. If you use it in a different or positive tone, that would be different, but you're actually trying to degrade women for being women. because those names are associated with mostly or almost always with women.
Right.
So I was like, wow, like it looks like you're not really that peaceful. If you want me to stop talking, you should actually try having a conversation with me. And I think out of spite or anger, she reposted my profile.
Mm-hmm.
And she had about 3,000 something followers, and they all happened to be British Pakistanis.
Mm.
So it was coming around the same timeline, or at least when I checked their profiles, and a lot of people didn't have posts. So they had followers and were following people, about 500-ish people. So they're legit accounts, but they didn't have any posts. And they wouldn't comment on posts. So that was quite smart, because you can report it if they comment on it or if they have posts, but you can't report it if they send you a message that's threatening.
Oh.
So I tried reporting it to Instagram. I even sent screenshots to the police, and I was like, what is happening? Like, I'm definitely being targeted. And I was accidentally added to a group. And in the group, once you're added to a group on Instagram and then they kick you out, all the history of the group is on your phone now because you've been added to it, and all the historical chats there. And I went and I scrolled up to earlier in the day, and there were basically messages like, oh, show her this video, or show her that video, or send her nude photos, or bully her, or threaten her. And I'm like, you guys, like they were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I saw it on some of the profiles. These were teenagers filled with so much hate. And it was just unbelievable, because like when I was a teenager, even if I found people's speech offensive, I've never gone the extra mile to threaten them, because what does that say about me as a person?
Right.
And yeah, so that's why there were so many, I guess, threats as well. And that was the most shocking part, because I'm like, and like their chats were all about, well, if you're an unbeliever, in the end of the day, you're going to hell anyway. So there was no, like in their minds, there was no thought that if you're a good person, you're going to go to heaven, regardless of what you believe in. And this is not to say all Muslims believe that. This is like, I was never raised like that.
Right.
I was raised that, if they're non-believers, they're not on the right path. So you're lucky to be born into a Muslim family. But at the same time, like, people do good deeds and they're going to go to, like, it was just a reward-based system. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense, right? Like, why would a Christian who's been born in that and has never been educated or lucky enough like me go to hell because he wasn't born in the religion? I think it was just really shocking to see that it was just really shocking to see that there was so much hate in young minds.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in England. They were born and raised here. I was born in a developing country. I hadn't even spoken to a lot of Western people or knew what homosexuality was. So I was quite sheltered, and I was around predominantly Muslims and a few Christians. But at the same time, I didn't even have access to shopping centers like you do here, because Tanzania had one or two, and even then they were a hike away. And you end up spending more money, which I didn't have as much growing up, instead of like actually gaining anything beneficial or doing it for entertainment. So I think like I never had access to so much of the outside, and yet I didn't have as much hatred. That's why me leaving religion with my family, they were disappointed, they were in disbelief, and they thought I'll come back and I'm brainwashed by Western people. But they were never hateful in terms of, oh, we'll kill you, or, that you're not our daughter anymore. So I think a lot of the hatred started, like, a lot of the hatred that I came across was after I left, which also made me be an activist. I wasn't planning on being an activist. I didn't want to go public. I was just like, these are my views. This is who I am. That's it. I never wanted to start a charity. I never wanted any of that. It was never part of my plan. But the moment I came out, and people just hated me for leaving. I didn't even blaspheme. I wouldn't even say I wanted Islam eradicated or anything, or that I was an anti-theist. And when, like, my first podcast, when the host asked, is like, is that how you feel? And I'm like, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know yet because I feel like it should be people's choice. Yes, it should be, but now I'm in a position that I would like for religion to be eliminated, but by actually educating more people. And even if they want to, like, even if they want to be religious, I would prefer it to be spiritual than the harmful practices that a lot of religion tends to bring out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so a lot of hate started after that podcast. That was very like we didn't blaspheme
When was
at
that?
all, or so this was, I think, back in 2018. So
2018.
mid or end of 2018.
Okay. You should know you're the first ex-Muslim we've had on the show.
Oh wow, I'm so honored. I
Oh
am
yeah,
really
yeah.
like I feel like because since I didn't even know ex-Muslims existed when I was questioning, or like I think this was even later in my years when I was questioning. And it
There's
wasn't
a lot
like
more of them than you may think.
yeah, exactly. So from when I first came out,
a
or
couple good friends that are.
yeah, from when I first came out and built that site to now, I have known so many that initially when I built the site, I had to use stock photos. Not a single person would give me a photo, or that I even knew, or even establish a stronger community. And in just like 2 years or 2.5 years, it's just like grown, and it's been stronger, and there are a lot of people talking about it. And I think it's great, and I feel like this is now if now that we're also helping other younger ex-Muslims come out, I feel like now it's our time to kind of establish our allies as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've grown and learned, I would like to continue more conversations with Muslims without a form of a debate or proving each other wrong or putting each
Right.
other down, because I think that's what happens. And when people ask me to debate, and I'm like, one, I don't want to debate you because we're never going to have a conversation.
Right.
If you start coming up with an idea to put me down versus my ideas, I am
Yep.
likely to react in defense. It's human nature. It's really hard. I don't know how Sam Harris does it, but it is really hard to maintain a calm composure. And I'm like, if you really want to talk about it without telling me that, hey, I'm completely wrong about it, let's actually discuss ideas. And I don't see that happening. And
Right.
I think a lot of girls who came on my Instagram page this past week, at least 3 or 4 of them who came in so angry, and they're like, you don't know Islam. And I'm like, have you read any other book apart from the Quran? Like even a Bible? Have you ever touched it? Or like a Hindu Vedas or Buddhism? Because like I started reading the Buddhism book, and I'm not a Buddhist because I never had a spiritual connection, but it was a lot less extreme or a lot calmer. And it was just really nice to think about, hey, there are other people believing in different things. So where does extremism come from? Like, or why are Chinese killing Muslims? Like, where is all of this coming from?
Right.
And what are different ideologies? But they were just happy being ignorant. They had no idea. So when I questioned, and I'm like, can you give me 5 verses from the Quran that talks about peace with people who disagree in your faith? And usually they'll pull out the verse, there's no compulsion in religion. And I'm like, okay, the reason I asked 5 is because that one verse is also it could be misinterpreted, but the idea was the verse was revealed in verses after say it's because Islam is the correct path. So you can't force people to accept the religion because this is the right path. Then they should know it because people eventually find the truth. And I think the person just ended up not replying, and then I just had to start blocking people. So I was like, this is like, initially I'm always about, let's have a chat, let's talk. And then I'm like, if I feel like it makes me anxious or I'm losing my cool, that's when I'm like, there's no point to this. I hope you can
Okay.
revisit it years later. Sorry.
If I could give you some motivation, you are actually doing a great thing, and the reason why you are getting all these threats is because they see you as effective. You are
Yeah.
actually having an effect.
Yeah.
When
I
I
mean,
started doing my things,
yeah.
I started getting threats. especially once they started getting more established. The more established you become, the more threats you're going to become. But you know what? It's because they see you as a threat because you're actually accomplishing something.
Yeah,
so you're doing a fantastic job.
I hope so, because I think like I've started writing my book and it's been like 5 or 10 pages, it's in between. But at the same time, I want to put it to a language, and this is what Faithless Hijabi is based on, which is also the title of the book, actually. It's based on one, understanding hijab is very explicitly for one group of people, which is the Muslims, but then being faithless and still wearing it says that there are Muslims who have left, there are Muslims who don't believe in it, and there are Muslims who wear it because they have to. And Faithless Hijabi is established on women sharing stories. That's all I wanted, because when I came out and I heard podcasts from Sarah Haider and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and I'm like, they're saying things that are part of my story. How many other people have a similar story? Because how many other people have shared experiences? And what I realized is these were people from everywhere, from different backgrounds, from African backgrounds, so Somalis, North Africa, Egyptians, to Palestinians as well, and Indians, Pakistanis, but also people in the UK, Canada, and the US. There were many things that overlapped with their stories. And that's how other girls, when they read it, and even when they were believers and praying and covering, they started uncovering more of what is their identity. Or, I feel like when people see your story relating to their story, they tend to take you as a role model as well. They're like, so how did you come out of this? Or what happened next with you? Which I feel like storytelling is a good part, but also when people write books and novels, they want to engage their audience into imagining it and then creating a perception of what may be a happy ending or what they would perceive as a better ending. And I feel like that's something that I want to follow up with my book as well. So contacting some of the girls and then asking them specific questions, and then like, where are you going next and what is next for you? And how are you currently dealing with a lot of trauma that you've come with?
That's a great question. And how about you? What's next for you?
At the moment, so Faithless Hijabi grew from being it grew from being more storytelling to then creating a community. Right. I was initially hesitant of creating a community because I wanted to value people's mental health, privacy, and boundaries as well. And then I realized I can only facilitate a room. I can't control a lot of the various players and actors. So I wanted to create a safe space that gave people an opportunity to talk about themselves, putting themselves vulnerable, but also giving them an anonymous ID. So we use Discord for it. And I don't do, I do a few verifications if I'm not sure about the person joining, whether they're a woman or whether they're even ex-Muslims. So I feel like a lot of people want to get into those circles and then exploit everybody else's vulnerabilities. So I guess the next step for me is making sure that group goes on, and sometimes it dies down and sometimes it comes up. But then also, I guess, facilitating more of the conversations that a lot of Muslim women can have with their families, and creating, I guess, a less aggressive environment for them. So helping them talk to their families, coming to mutual consent, but also protecting themselves from what is inevitable emotional abuse. Mm-hmm. So I guess the next step for me is basically leading those conversations. Some of my methods are not necessarily to be in support of that. So a lot of my posts can be quite provocative. Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes that pushes a few people away, which is fine. I really do like doing a lot of my activism differently. I feel like if you're going to judge me based on a post I've put in and you're not going to talk to me, you're not going to listen to me anyway. But if you're really willing to tell me, hey, I think you've got this wrong, and if you really want to clarify it, I am willing to listen to you. And basically, I agree that people should, I do have Muslim friends. And since becoming an ex-Muslim activist, I have had many Muslim friends after, and even more now, because they're like, I don't agree with you with this or this or this, but then you are talking about a problem. You are addressing something that I go through, and I still want to be a Muslim, but I don't know how to work towards it. So I feel like the next steps for me for the next few years will be sharing those stories of other women, but also facilitating conversations. And I think personally, I'm learning from when I first started to come out of negative situations. But I was curious to know, when you guys came out or when you guys made it public, did you get as many threats, or is this just exclusive to like people who talk about Islam or specifically ex-Muslims?
Daniel, I'll let you go first. I think you cradle atheist, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the odd one out on this one.
Okay.
I was born to an atheist family. My parents and grandparents are atheists.
Gotcha.
So, it's
not so much.
I guess I got the lucky dice roll there. I will say I did get a lot of when I started getting a lot of threats were from when I started going after other things like the alt med community and people that engage in quackery and pseudoscience. And then I also attacked religion at the same time. And then they all came out of the woodwork. My father, growing up, always used to tell me to kind of keep the atheism to yourself. It acts like a magnet for problems once you start talking about it. And me being who I am, I always have to be the loudest one in the room. And so, I mean, throw it at me, come at me, bro.
I didn't have any kind of danger coming out. Mine was all family stress, stuff like that. Nothing compared to what you go through as a Muslim. Now, there are some communities in some parts of America where Christianity can be a little more dangerous than other parts of the community. I don't, you know what I mean? But it's, again, nothing like what you face in the Middle East or even in parts of Europe. Whenever you're an ex-Muslim, being an ex-Muslim, I know that there's this notion of peace, but my understanding is you're one, by being an ex-Muslim and a female, you're one of the biggest targets of the zealots and the fanatics. I think would there be anybody else more of a target for those people than you?
Does you have a college education?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I finished my master's like when I was 21.
So then she's really a target. Educated, outspoken. Yeah, she's everything that they want to go after.
I mean, the one thing that really, really pisses people off is that I still have contact with my family, which is like I said, which is quite rare because my family was quite chilled out. Like they didn't even see any much aggression because I was truly brought up with the notion that Islam is peaceful because my parents practiced that way. And so they were quite like laid back. I mean, even gossiping as well. I come from a community where gossip is so big. I mean, I would think even bigger than the south part of the US, but like South Asian families can be quite intense in terms of gossip, pushing people to do things their way. So my family was, I guess, quite unique, and like in the community, a lot of people knew my dad. So in that way, I guess I was raised quite differently from what I have faced now, which is surprising because when my family see all of that, like my brother sometimes sees it on social media and he's like, it's the Muslims that are bad, not Islam. And I'm like, okay, like I'll let you have that because I feel like it's a good realization for you to now see where's all this coming from. And I think the easiest part, like the easiest part for me to leave was while I wasn't praying, I was still fasting. I would try to eat only halal, but then I grew out of it. I just went like, doesn't matter. And I never had alcohol, even like I had alcohol 2 years after I became an atheist. But even then, like the idea was that I received a lot of aggression after I came out because I started questioning, and I'm like, but gay people should be allowed to marry. Like, why do you care? And when people started quoting the books and history and Islamic history, that's when I was like, oh my God, like you're right. Like you're right. Like I'm not saying that they shouldn't get married, but you're right. Islam is aggressive. That's exactly the perspective that people have given me by quoting the book. So that's when I started reading them. And that's when I'm like, there has to be peaceful verses. So what if me and somebody else disagree on it? Why should I have to renounce my faith? Like, I can still be a Muslim. And that's when I realized I don't want to be a Muslim. I never want to be in support of an idea that creates any sort of hate towards people. I mean, it's okay if we disagree in ideas. It's okay if we disagree, like, you have a different God and I have a different God. But then when you think that, some of your friends who are not Muslims are going to go to hell, or some of your friends who are gay should never get married, or if they do, they're going to go to hell. And it was just shocking. Like, I was like, this is not human rights. This is not something as a person I ever want to be part of or have been this hateful. I've always been outspoken with women's rights. And when I actually read the book, I was shocked. Like there were a lot of things that I wasn't taught, even if they were in the book. So a lot of things that a lot of Muslims probably have not read, and they're in the books. And if they have read, they justify it. I remember asking my sister, "What do you think about two women equaling to one when it comes to testimony?" And she went like, she had no answer, but then she went like, "I think it was because women at the time weren't smart enough or they'd never studied, so their credibility did not count in terms of testimony." And I'm like, but is that fair? Because that is still the book. And because I'm the first one who's ever gotten graduated in my family, and I'm the middle child, my family respects that I have a bit more knowledge than they do. So I'm like, okay, look, I graduated from my master's. Is it okay for somebody who has never gone through education or has never worked as much as I have to have more value in what he says as compared to me? And she was a bit taken back. She never questioned it again. Like, I don't think these are things that we even thought about every day. But I think it was one way where she was like, I don't know. Like, I think to her it didn't matter because she lives around people who have the same identities at her, so she never had a conflict of it. But because I lived in the West and I was constantly around people who were different to me, my friends were not all Muslims. The food around me wasn't all halal, and alcohol didn't bother me, but I didn't understand why people were drinking. But it was still their choice. And in my head, I'm like, so why are they prevented from going to heaven? Like, it didn't. Well, a lot of these teachings didn't make sense, and then I had to actually read the book because I had to know what I stand for if I call myself a Muslim. Like, what are the values that a good Muslim should have? I didn't find any comfort in praying because I didn't understand why a God would create me and then want me to pray, and I completely find it boring. So for me to force myself, it does not make sense. Like, I'm sure God has better things to do than to see if I was praying or not. And, at the same time, I'm like, well, God and I have a special connection. We talk sometimes, but a lot of my actions were never driven by the fear of hell or heaven. It was mostly, I guess, empathy for others that led me to identify myself either more as a Muslim or understand what I am right now. And that's when, like, I think it took me 3 years before I actually left to begin to to question what I stood for.
Right. Well, you actually had a pretty good, if I remember right, I saw your show on Neil, the 604 Atheist, your coming out show, and you had a pretty easy coming out experience because your family's fairly open-minded considering that. But now you run a community where you help other women come out from the faith. Have you run into a lot of horror stories? I mean, that we have our own views about what we think happens.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, every time I read a story or I talk to other people, I'm always so shocked. But there are a lot of things that I'm uncovering from my past that I had probably never, I guess, faced or understood what that meant. So I remember one scenario when I was 14, I was wearing a hijab until I was 19. I started when I was 8. And I remember talking to my mom and I was like, I want to remove it. And she's like, well, your dad's not going to allow it. She didn't actually say no. She's like, this is what you're meant to do. And she's like, but you probably have to wait to see if your husband allows it. Even then, like thinking about who you'd get married to, they would be religious. So I was like, but at that point I was a little heartbroken, but I was like, okay, fair enough, I get it. So in my head I was like, okay, so I have to marry somebody because then they have to allow me to do this. That I want somebody who listens to music because I had never really heard music. And I was okay. Like I was fine until like I was 12. We would hear bits of Bollywood music, but I never actually had access to just go and like, I think it was MTV at the time, and it was just like music. Like music TV, yes. And it was just like music. I was never allowed to browse those. But so those were a few things that were quite shocking from my past. So it wasn't anything terrible as a lot of like physical abuse towards myself. It was mostly emotional. And I think it was just the way we were raised to always owe our parents our lives. And I think they were raised the same way and they never complained. So they expect future generations to go the same way as well. But the more I read the stories about other people and the more ex-Muslims I talk to, not just women, I feel like a lot of men find a bit more comforting coming out to women as well. But I always have to tread with caution because that can go south really easy. I've had people abuse that power. So I feel more comfortable helping more women because not many people abuse that. Right. But the horror stories that I've heard, a lot of, I guess, sexual assault from families, from fathers and brothers. But that I don't think that has much to do with Islam as much as it has with how women are sexualized from a young age. It's prominent in a lot of non-Western culture.
Well, I have heard about the, again, I've got my own perspective on this, but the honor killings that you hear, the fathers who over here in America, and then, of course, you don't know how often it happens over in other places, but we've heard about it happening here in America where fathers will go kill their daughters because they've dishonored them through X, Y, or Z activity, those are the horror stories. I mean,
no, I have heard of it. I mean, my very first project with Faithless Hijabi that was more than sharing stories was helping a Saudi girl out of Saudi Arabia. So she contacted me 2-3 months before she actually left, and this was after Rahaf Al Qunun, the girl who is stuck in Thailand and then moved to Canada, was like after she left, and this was like a month later. And I was trying to talk to the girl and then understanding her next steps, like how would she be safe? And it was a lot of, I guess, spy shit that we had to kind of arrange, like different Ubers and like not going directly to the airport and going from different locations, different SIM cards. But basically, she was actually getting abused by her parents for not doing the chores, and she wasn't allowed to go outside of the house to work. Let alone, like, she got an education. So they would all be encouraged to get an education, which is great because then on paper they're like, oh, well, Saudi women are studying, and then it's their choice not to work. Some families do allow it, but the girl that I was talking to, basically she got hunted down until Germany, and she escaped with her little sister because she didn't want her sister to grow up with it. And now they're both happy and they don't see themselves as victims. But I remember her talking to me from one of the asylum centers in Germany, and she was basically telling, like, in Saudi Arabia, you kind of live like a princess and trapped as well, but you have servants and you've never done housework, or you've sometimes done housework, but you've never shared a room and whatnot. And then she goes on to a dormitory where people would check all your bags if something is missing in like the shelter. And I'm like, so how does it feel to you? Because you've lived in your own home before and you've never had somebody check this. And she's like, I prefer this a million times more than living as like a hidden woman. So these were all stories that could have definitely gone south. And with some of the girls I've spoken to, their fathers have threatened them, or their brothers, really. I think because the brothers are younger and have more energy to espouse such violence, it comes from brothers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
in a way, I got really lucky. I think the only thing that went south with my brother and I was the first time we met after I told him I'd come out, and we got into an argument. And I'm like, I really don't want to discuss this because if I do, you're not going to like what I have to say. And I was like, I'm going to leave the house for a few hours, and that's the heated it has gotten.
Yeah.
But with other people, it was definitely like violence has been the case. And other girls have escaped since as well, like violence, forced marriages as well.
Mm-hmm.
So a girl taken from the UK to Pakistan, given a passport, and then she moved to somewhere else in Europe. After that, we helped her get some money on GoFundMe, and it still stays to be an issue. But the good part is because now more and more are leaving, a lot of the efforts with Muslim communities are going towards keeping people in the religion versus inviting new people. So we've already seen that shift. We've already seen a lot of the people, the Dawa boys, so Dawa means invitation to religion, their efforts being moved towards more young people and keeping them in religion and creating content and videos and getting the funds for that to keep people in religion and answer their questions versus invite people. So there's definitely a shift of how they've been approaching it and the audience as well.
You think that's a good sign? There's so many, and they're not attracting as many people as they used to be, or there's something about their numbers that are getting them worried. So they're trying to plug the holes rather than.
I think in a way it's a win if their efforts are being targeted towards young people staying there, because I feel that the more young people know, they can make more informed decisions. I definitely like one, I don't think numbers represent anything. Um, more people will convert. Yes, Islam is the fastest growing religion with birth or whatnot, but that doesn't mean it is the truth. And I certainly don't want people to convert because of me or because of something I've said. I would like to engage them to think more about it. So their efforts into educating more young people, yes, if those people are watching those videos, that means they're doubting, or they will begin to doubt it, or they will soon understand that maybe they should do more research. So I feel like in a way that this can like bring more people to do more of their rational reasoning. And then if they decide to stay in religion, fine. As long as you know that there are some practices that are harmful, I think that would be a win for me personally.
Right. Have you seen a swell in your following? Have you, I don't know how you measure your community, whether it be in Facebook page likes or, but have you seen a swell in people looking to Faithless Hijabi for help?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely increased from when we first started. People coming. I also sometimes sneak into ExMuslim Reddit to just read out, because a lot of people go there for help. So I'll just start posting anonymously, and I'm like, oh, this is what I think you should do. But yeah, I've seen that increase massively. I've seen people who've gone from, I am so angry at you, to a year later, so I'm questioning. So I think that shift means that they they're listening, and they're actually spending that effort into thinking. And a lot of people who are not thinking will also find it convenient to stay in the religion, which I'm okay with. But I think it is mostly about the bad practices that we espouse on other people, so the threats that they give out, and I guess the whole shaming other people for not wearing, other women for not wearing the hijab, it's quite demoralizing for many. I got it when I was still Muslim, and I was like, I just don't want to wear it. I'd never worn a dress. I'd never shown my legs until like I think it was 2000 and guess 15, 16.
Wow.
And I'd taken off my scarf in 2011-ish or 12-ish. So for 4 years, I wouldn't even go out wearing sleeveless. I'd
Really?
always worn long sleeves. Yeah, I had always worn long sleeves, and it was just like I was so ashamed to be an object, because I was brought up thinking that women who don't wear the hijab are basically not worthy of respect, and that still carries on with me. sometimes when people talk about how they feel modest wearing the hijab and they don't want to be an object, not realizing that they're being objects by having that, I guess, that mindset.
Right. Well, there are a lot of different aspects of Islam that are, all right. So I've been running a YouTube channel. Normally I deal with Christianity and Christians, but occasionally I've mentioned Islam. I mean, people were hitting me up. Hey, when are you going to do videos about Islam? Because, you need to address that too. And then I had other people, content creators, go, don't talk about Islam because that'll get your channel banned. And, it's like just talking about addressing Islam brings fear.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly like the threats that we get and the stigmatization there is around talking about Islam versus any other ideology. Well, one, don't know about the channel banning, but they are correct. Like it is going to either blow up your channel with a lot of hate, or people are going to listen to you. And sometimes it's a risk I'm willing to take, because evidently my activism will overlap my professional life, which means I'm still that same person posting online and the person working in a tech job. And it has happened that people have emailed my workplace. They found out where I worked. They
Really?
emailed my workplace. They're like, you need to fire her. And I was like, I was so scared, and I was on my probation. So I was like, well, if they want to get rid of me, they really should. And that's nothing to stop them.
Right.
But is this going to happen with every other company I work with?
Yeah.
The good part was that we have laws here that protect people's political views and religious views, which are separate to the company they work for, unless they incite violence, which I don't have, and unless they speak on behalf of the company, that I don't, because I use two different names. And I guess it's just, it is difficult because a lot of it can overlap. And I think this is what I said on Neil's show as well. I guess if you're objective in your view, or as much as you can be, and put the facts out there for people to then listen to it differently or in a different tone, and I guess your credibility with other videos does play a part. So yeah, no, it is interesting. I get a lot of backlash because, well, Muslims think Muslims and a lot of the left, like far left people, think that I'm inviting far right groups to take my narrative and be anti-Muslim bigots. But the truth is, bigotry doesn't need a reason. If somebody's going to be a bigot, they don't need to hear it from me. They're going to continue it. This is a problem they have. Nothing I say will change it. Nothing I don't say will change it. I think my voice and other people's voice in the truth is valuable, and that experiences as well. We shouldn't be silencing them, because the more, I also think that the far right needs to talk about it so other people can actually have a conversation instead of shutting them up. So I don't think you're eliminating any ideas if you don't talk about it. I'm really sorry, go on.
I have a question for you real quick from the chat. Epileptic Skeptic would like to know, how do you react to seeing hijab supported in mainstream culture, like when there was a Muslim designer on the Project Runway TV show? How do you feel about that when it's out there?
Yeah. See, well, there are multiple aspects of it. Are these Muslims that are wearing the hijab, or are these other people that are wearing it? If they're Muslims, then definitely they should wear what they want to, and they should be represented the way they want to be represented. But I do quite dislike it when other people from different cultures fetishize it. Because
inclusion.
Yeah, because at the same time they're appropriating something that represents misogyny. I mean, would somebody put a Confederate flag and walk down the runway? And is that okay? If that is okay, then we should be allowing that as well. Or any other harmful symbols, or like the Nazi swastika is called the Hakenkreuz. Yeah. Like, is that okay? Like, if something that signifies something that is harmful, is that okay to be taken out? I think a lot of people don't know the history of it.
Right. Well,
and they want to be inclusive, but they're not.
Right. If I may, I think based on the question, I think what they're asking is, whenever the mainstream media, like we have a a hero on a TV show or a cast of characters, and one of them is a Muslim and they've got the hijab and it shows them in a positive light, but we see the hijab as a device of oppression based on the religion, blah, 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 blah. I think that's, let me read that. How does Zara react to seeing hijab supported in mainstream culture, like when there was a Muslim, actual Muslim female, not a question of who she was. It was an actual Muslim designer on the Project One Runway TV show. So by putting a Muslim wearing the hijab on the TV show is supporting. Well, see, of course, I see it as being like open-mindedness and liberal. We let everybody have their own religion, but I'm just expressing the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I am quite divided in that. So one, like I said, if Muslim women are wearing it or if they're representing Muslim women in that way, then I think representation of women who do wear it is important, but also not forgetting that there are also Muslims who don't wear it.
Right.
And that they should be represented as well. I think the Olympics had papers on the first hijab wearing Muslim women who won a bronze medal, while there were other Muslim athletes who had won, but they weren't wearing a hijab, but they weren't spoken about at all.
Right.
So I feel like it is quite it's quite unbalanced in terms of how they're representing Muslims as well. I remember somebody had written an article to the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and she said, you wearing the hijab has actually made it difficult for girls like me who are Muslims and hold a Muslim identity and don't wear the hijab, because then our parents are forcing us to say, look, the PM is wearing it.
Yeah.
Why aren't you wearing it? Yeah. And then that way they're subjugated or forced to wear it. Because they're like, well, you know, in a Western country, if somebody who is not a Muslim is choosing to cover her hair, why aren't you wearing it? I think the idea needs to be changed from in different angles as well. Like not just the hijab, but how modesty rules imposed on women is damaging to the society. And that's what we need to continuously focus on and talk about. Like I said, I feel quite halfway between a representation of a woman, which is, yes, a reality. There are many Muslim women who do wear the hijab and they should be represented, but at the same time, there are Muslim women who don't wear hijab. But also, like, the hijab itself is quite misogynistic.
Yeah.
I think, in a way, I also see, I'm thinking of young girls who have only, like myself, who have only known at the age of 10 or 12 that all Muslim women wear a hijab, and them seeing somebody else on a TV, it kind of helps see the young girls that, hey, look, she's wearing a hijab. She can be an actress. Why can't I? And I think that opens up a world. It definitely does. At the same time, sometimes it is I do feel quite conflicted as well when I see the hijab on TV, because I'm like, does that then mean that the girl has to grow up to wear hijab to do that? Is she not going to be accepted if she doesn't? So it is mixed messaging, and I wish I could just have a simple yes or no, or I don't like it or I hate it. But just thinking about girls who do come from backgrounds where that could possibly be their only way to dream outside of what has been set for them.
Did you
have faith. Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I have faith in more of the younger generations or my generations who become parents to then propagate those messaging. Like when I was in Hyde Park and I saw a Turkish father who was a Muslim and his daughter wearing shorts, and some a convert woman came to a friend of mine, Faye, and she went how could you wear these clothes? And I'm like, you're in the UK. How could, imagine I come up to you and ask you, how could you wear this clothes? Why would you say it? And the father went it says it's nowhere in the Quran that says that women need to cover up. And even then, it is their choice. You shouldn't be shaming that. And I'm like, are you a Muslim? And he's like, yeah, my daughter is too, but she's not wearing it. I don't care. And those are the fathers that we really, really need to celebrate and and bring those fathers to talk to the other fathers who don't allow their girls to achieve the same standards as they would for their boys.
Absolutely. We have another comment here from the chat. Kristin wants to know, Do you have a comment on what Jeff Goldblum said on RuPaul's Drag Race show? Have you seen those clips?
Yeah, I did see those clips. I think it was a very called for comment.
Called for, yes.
Yeah, I think it was, and it was a question actually. It wasn't even a comment.
Right.
I think it
You're
was a
right.
question.
Yeah, he was just asking them.
Questions shouldn't actually be. Questions are not even opinions yet. There are what shapes opinions in terms of how you respond to them and what information the person takes from it. And if we're going to shut down questions, we're basically shutting down any conversation. If Jeff was probably curious, he probably doesn't see, he probably doesn't see Islam as being LGBT supportive.
Right.
And I'm sorry, it's in the books. Like, it is in your books that says it is not.
He was spot on. And I hadn't thought about it the way you pointed that out. He was just asking questions. Yeah. If the answers to those questions make you uncomfortable to the point to where you don't want the question asked, we should shine a light on that question.
Exactly. And I feel like it was the right show. It's not like him seeing any woman on the road and asking, it's like, isn't Islam anti-women and anti-LGBT? This was the right show where it was a drag show where I forgot the name of the contestant, but where the person was actually asked, like, I understand you're wearing an American flag and you're in this show, but does your religion, like, you're propagating, you're showing a representation. Yes, great. But at the same time, is this the correct representation of Islam as such? Yes, there are gay Muslims. Yes, there are trans Muslims. And yes, there are women who are Muslims as well. But at the same time, you're on a show that will perhaps get you killed, most likely get you killed in any other Muslim majority country.
Right.
And you're lucky to be in a country where it's safe for you. Great, yeah. But then at the same time, how have Muslims felt about the person actually wearing a hijab? I'm sure they would be as offended. So here, nobody's winning, because the person wearing it will probably get even more death threats, if not Jeff.
Yeah.
So
and Jeff is one of those really big stars that they would threaten him if they knew how to get a hold of him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
No, I'm sure they're still coming. I'm sure the threats are still going to come. I mean, the funny part is the moderate Muslims and the progressive Muslims going like, oh, well, it's not all Muslims who say that. Or it's like the progressive Islam says this. And I'm like, okay, well, the progressive Islam isn't really written in your books, is it? Like, it's a fluffy version of you. But I feel like that question was so called for. It was also curiosity, if not pointing out the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Question in the question box there.
I'm sorry. What's that, Daniel?
I don't know how to quite say the name. Isaac Ibrahim, I believe, asked Zara a question. The geology expert, oh boy, that's quite a name for him. In Iran, explained why women must cover up in his new, oh boy, boobquake theory. Did you hear about that new theory? Oh my.
I haven't heard about the theory. Does anybody else know what it is?
I haven't heard about it either. Real quick, I wanted to ask. Go ahead.
I mean, I've heard some imams say some pretty outrageous things before, so it wouldn't surprise me. But then again, most zealots say some rather outrageous things. I mean, it's not just exclusive to Islam. It's all zealots say stupid stuff. I mean, we could talk about the Christian preacher that was talking about fire buttholes.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen the Saudi Arabian, I don't know if he's Saudi Arabian, but they were talking about women driving. And they're like, women can't drive because there are vibrations in the car that affect the driver's seat. And I was like, what? I was like, what?
I want to ask, are you associated with that group? I think it's called Free the Hijab. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Free from Hijab, yeah.
Yeah. Are you associated with them?
Yeah. So we have a group that works with that. So that's with Yasmin Mohammed, Asra Numani, Masi Al-Najad, So Masi has her own White Wednesdays thing, and then we kind of do for Iranian women, and then we kind of do a more bigger every other Muslim woman, or otherwise as well.
Okay.
I think the movement is great. It addresses different aspects and how I guess how different icons on apps or different signals that a lot of Western feminists wear or talk about the hijab affects people who actually wear it, or rejects people who can't remove it or want to remove it. I think it's definitely blindsided, because a lot of politicians don't talk about, hey, those Muslim women in Iran who don't wear about it, but they'll always talk about the Muslim woman who was harassed on the bus. Both are wrong, and it's only biased on one side. I have people who talk about, so when I talk about the death threats I get, and people are like, oh, you're such a drama queen. Muslims get death threats through. And I'm like, who from? Like, oh, and I'm like, oh, okay. If somebody is called, and I'm like, would you say the same thing if somebody complained about people pulling out her hijab on the bus, or people calling her names on the bus for wearing a hijab? Would it be the same reaction, saying she's a drama queen? No.
Right.
It's quite biased, especially with ex-Muslims. It's more like you're wrong, and they really like to victimize ex-Muslims. They really like to, I guess, I remember having a Twitter thread on somebody being a bully, and I was quite composed.
Can I jump in real fast?
So yeah, go for it.
Just hold that thought, because I was interested in what you were saying. I noticed there's a comment here, and it says, why are we only attacking Islam and why no other religion? And I have kind of an answer to that. No one ever says a dang thing when someone criticizes Christianity, but the moment someone criticizes Islam, someone always makes that darn comment.
Right.
And we spend every single darn episode that I've watched and I've been involved in criticizing Christianity in one way or another, because that's what we know in the Western world. But the moment we bring up Islam, I always see those kinds of questions.
They level that argument.
It's a tired argument, and is really being dismissive of something else. It's that pseudo token inclusion that I absolutely can't stand.
Well, I just want to point out that this is, again, as I stated earlier, Miss Zara is our very first ex-Muslim guest, so y'all can just pedal on with your why are you picking on Muslims? Islam is a big old huge religion. It can defend itself. You can go away. Carry on, Ms. Zara, with your thing.
No, all good. No, I mean, I have more to add to that. Well, if we look about basic human rights, countries, people, or ideology that are in countries, ideologies, and religions that prevent people from getting basic human rights, the first one that stands out to you is Islam. Absolutely. The countries that will kill apostates, Muslim majority countries, they're only implementing Islam. Sure, Christianity also had the apostasy rule. Right now, not being practiced by anyone, really. Maybe some families do still practice honor killing. I know ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they practice a lot of shunning and ostracism, which a lot of Muslims get as well. But we're talking about the basic right to live because you don't believe, let alone the right to love somebody because you're gay. It's only being prevented by one religion. And I am somebody that talks about I'm an anti-theist, so I will openly out there reject a God, especially if it's the God being portrayed in Abrahamic religion.
Absolutely.
But with Islam, you're not only talking about just an idea or the practicing of Muslims or hijab. This is basically like talking about FGM that comes under Islam as well. There are some hadith that talk about it is encouraged for women to have their clitoris, part of their clitoris cut off. That's like 90%. That's like 80 to 90% of Egyptians, Somalis, and some of the Ethiopians. It's a less percentage in Ethiopians because there are more Christians in Ethiopia as compared to Egypt. I think so, or at least relative. But Yeah, no, I think it is important that we talk about, well, one, all ideas, but what I choose to talk about or what this is about shouldn't be because we're targeting one religion. It's
Right.
because this is my focal point. It's more about whataboutism is such a weak fallacy. Like, why don't you talk about this? Or somebody came on my comments, they're like, why didn't you talk about science? Why didn't you talk about Salafism? Why didn't you talk about this? And I'm like, have you heard any of my work? Have you
Right.
seen any of my art? Have you read any of my article? Like nothing. It's just you saw one post and you have no idea who I am. You've never heard any of my podcasts that I don't even talk about attacking Islam. A lot of my podcasts are about encouraging conversation, talking about myself, talking about other girls, and talking about how we move forward versus, being stuck backwards.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I like that question. I get it quite a bit as well. And I
Well,
think it's ridiculous because it just ignores the fact, well, one, I'm an ex-Muslim as well.
mhm.
Like there's one reason if I'm calling myself an ex-Muslim is because I attach to that identity. Like like I attach to that identity intentionally. I forgot the word intentionally.
That's all right. Well, we've our comments going on here in the chat. But there's so many examples of damage and violence done by Muslims or people who follow certain aspects of Islam. I mean, you can't, again, we don't want to vilify an entire group of people. Not everybody is bad. But the closer you follow to the core teachings of what is written in the Quran and the Hadith, then the more likely you are to be violent and murderous. And like you were saying earlier, what about beauty? Is there a lot of beauty and love and mercy and peace and art and culture in
I
the
don't, I don't,
Quran?
I don't think there's a lot of art that has to do with people. Islamic art is beautiful, but it is very different. It's more,
I meant in the Quran. Like whenever you read the
um,
Quran, do you read it as there's no art? It's all blood
there's
and
no
murder, death,
art.
kill, and fear and pain and
There's that, and there's the majority of the part is because your God is so merciful. And then you read that one verse, and
yeah,
you're like, how can this God, who is apparently all-knowing and merciful, still want somebody dead? It makes no
right,
sense. I mean, I'm against I'm against corporal punishment also, like, for rapists as well, and I'm like,
mhm,
I don't want them killed, I want them to be in jail,
right,
I want the country to be safe, but I don't want them killed. Even in
right,
self-defense, it makes no sense if I can avoid it to protect myself by killing somebody. Like, I'm against that form of, torture as
hmm,
well. Um, and then you talk about God wanting to kill somebody because they're an apostate, because they talked about Islam in a way that wasn't pretty.
right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's why somebody should be killed, right? Okay,
Or cut
that
off their
makes sense.
hand, or cut off their fingertips, or all the
It's
glorious things, the merciful, loving ways that are
yeah, that
demonstrated.
like I think the point is that why aren't more Muslims talking about it? Why aren't more Muslims raising their voices against such things in the Quran? Like if you were actually a strong believer that Islam is peaceful, that Islam should be promoting or is, in your opinion, promoting human rights and peace, then why aren't you questioning this? Why aren't you talking up to those countries that basically want to kill gay people or people for blaspheming? I was young and I thought it was okay to kill people for blasphemy. And I'm like,
Right.
for a while, like I was like 14 to 18, but I'm like, would I do it though? Like, would I be in a country, be okay with somebody getting killed? I could never be okay with it. When Salman Rushdie's case came out and people were talking about it,
Mhm.
I was really young, not even interested in religion, and people wanted to kill him. And I'm like, but why? Like,
Right.
so, like, why kill the people who have drawn cartoons? Like, how does it affect you?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
like, if it offends you, fine. You don't like it, block them. Like I don't like receiving emails that I had subscribed to 10 years ago about Islam or like Islamic schools. I have blocked it. Why actually go against them? And if I have to do it, I'll do it on my wall. I rarely ever comment in attack. I always write in my opinion or this is what the Quran says. So what are you saying? But I feel like if we contribute to basically violence in response, even if we're atheists, and I've seen this with a lot of atheists as well or Hindus as well. They're like, oh, they're all terrorists. Why play to their level? Why play to those extremist level? Because it doesn't make us any better. I mean, if somebody wants to be super religious, fine, do it. Be super religious as long as you're not harming anyone. If I want to be super atheist, I will be super atheist.
Right.
As long as I'm not actually calling out, like my sisters wear a hijab. Why would I be stupid enough to say I hate Muslims when my own sisters in my family are Muslim and they wear a hijab?
Right.
Like, we still disagree on it, and if they can accept me, I can accept them. Like, we need to continuously, I guess, the idea is that so this is what I was going to say, that in a Twitter thread, a Muslim Somali girl, she was quite young, I believe she was less than 22, she just started attacking me, and she's like, oh, did your parents disown you? Did your community shun you? Did your parents want you killed? And I'm like, like the community shunning was mostly because I walked away, but none of that had happened to me. But she had drawn these ideas of what ex-Muslims should go through and how to play to to those vulnerabilities, that in a way she had made us to be, I guess, so weak, and those were her tactics to shut people up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how could you promote that? Like, why would you say that? Like, what, like, in a way that, people talking about the person who went like, why do you only talk about Islam, is like another way to then categorize me and try to shut me up or anybody
Right.
else that talks about it.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think we should continuously talk about it and promote humanism, if anything. I feel like
Absolutely.
if Muslims really want to, I guess, shut us up in a way, they should be continuing to reform those practices that are in violation of human rights.
Right. And we also need to keep shining a light on these things, all these things that they don't want you. If they don't want you talking about it, there's a reason why they don't want you talking about it.
Exactly.
And the talk about female circumcision, we barely even touched upon that thing. The talk about how they treat gays, and again, not all Muslims do this. We know this. We're not speaking in absolutes in such fashions. We're talking about the more fanatical, the more religious, the more
Conservatives as well, like
conservatives. Yeah.
not even, they don't even have to be people who carry out those. I mean, I don't know. My parents didn't even know about FGM, even if we knew some Muslims were doing it, or maybe we never really spoke about it. Sometimes I like to think that, my parents just don't look into these issues, or they've just not cared. But like like I said, I was exposed to most of it after I came out.
Mm-hmm.
But just thinking about FGM, this was like a year before I came out. I was talking to a lot of Muslim women, not Somali, so they're called the Bohoras. And they usually wear a colorful hijab, but their front head shows, but it's different. But I was talking to some of them and I'm like, have you got circumcised? And they're like, yeah, but it's not FGM. And I'm like, anything that touches you down there that is trying to mutilate you or cut you is FGM. And then I'm like, would you get your kids circumcised? And some of them actually said yes. They're like, I did it. My kids would do it. It was painful, but I don't remember it. I was probably a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, well, our brains have a tendency to sometimes block out something that is very painful, like memories.
Ooh.
And they would make their kids do it. And there are some girls that talk to me and they're like, my mom had done it and she didn't want me to do it. She didn't believe in that practice anymore. And sometimes they can't even tell the entire community that they chose not to do it because they would be shunned from their community for not doing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that exists. And a lot of it, and these are a lot of women propagating those ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of
Hurtful.
women, exactly. There are a lot of women who are misogynistic. And I feel like a lot of times we blame men for doing it, but a lot of women are also responsible for it. A lot of women raise their sons that way. A lot of women see how a lot of women raise their daughters the same way and then treat their sons and daughters differently. And that is exactly what creates a toxic environment. And I think you're right, we should be highlighting all of this. And that's why like sharing the stories are more about experiences than they are about religion. But how could like 200 girls who were on different parts of the world, who are probably not even friends, have so much in common? Like, what culture is this? Like, where does this culture come off that everybody goes like, but FGM is cultural? And I'm like, is it? Is it if your religion says? And they're like, 50 other countries that practice it, even in secret, where it's illegal as well. Like, how is it culture then?
Yeah. Interesting.
And I feel like, culture and religion are quite intertwined. A lot of the religious ideology becomes culture. And that is what a lot of people coming from different nations, like Indonesia, would have in common with Egypt. Sorry?
I was just asking if little 2 cents on my end. When it comes down to the whole culture argument, if your culture is claiming that violence against women, children, whatever, is part of your culture, then it should be condemned.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're on the outside crowd, screw your token inclusion. If you're hurting people, it needs to stop.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I have a question here for you from the chat, Miss Zara. And I have a question for you. Actually, let me ask Daniel real quick a question, then we'll get back to these, because this one's getting further away. Daniel, as a Facebook social media group manager kind of person, do you have Facebook groups that deal with Islam? And do they, remember we were talking about YouTube and getting banned, do you have more of a problem criticizing Islam in those groups or no?
So it really depends, because Islam gets muddied. The water gets really muddied with Islam. And it's like what we just saw earlier in the chat when I jumped down whoever it was, throat about it. It's so easy to criticize Christianity because they are the majority religion. But the moment you criticize Islam, people immediately go, oh, you're going after a marginalized community. And I like to point out, I was like, hey, let me remind you, Islam is not a race. It's an ideology. And it is just as abhorrent as Christianity, if not worse in some cases, depending on what sect you're looking at.
Gotcha.
So under no reason, for no way in any sort of matter, sorry to get a little tongue-tied here, would I ever defend Islam. It's not okay to marginalize people because they're people. But the ideology is, if they're hurting people, is just wrong. Right. And I've seen people do that where they say, oh, how dare you criticize, Muslims or Islam. It's like, I don't think you understand. I'm criticizing the ideology and the belief.
Well, what I meant is if I go create a Islam is bad group, is Facebook more likely to get onto me and shut down my Islam group than it is against Christian group? That's what I was saying.
Absolutely. That's the quickest way to get on Facebook's bad side. And I've been struggling with Facebook a lot lately. And I've dared criticize Islam. I've dared making satirical, funny posts.
Yeah. And he's been banned quite a lot lately.
I'm on a 30-day hiatus right now.
Oh, are you? Look at her. She's doing her too. Okay. I was just curious about that.
I was banned for posting a screenshot of a rape threat that I got.
Yes.
So that's what I was banned for. I didn't even say anything to that person, and I'm like, this is the threat that I got. And I was banned in like a day or two.
There was one of the things that I was reading and that's been circulating around is a lot of the people that work for Facebook, it gets shipped out overseas. And there's been a theory, now granted, I can't substantiate, so this is one of those kinds of things that I've heard floating around, and it makes sense when people talk about it. There's a theory going around that the areas that Facebook divvies out these moderators, they're primarily in very religious areas, and a lot of them are in Muslim primary countries. And one of the issues is obviously if you offend someone who's Muslim, they're going to go after you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, and I'm not sure if that is true. Like, I worked at Google and thinking about policies, obviously, Google has it very differently from Facebook. Google's wasn't, or is not anymore a social media platform. But in terms of how they operate, well, policies are decided one, globally, and then two, decided by country, knowing the country's laws. So in Pakistan, the policy would be very different against blaspheme as compared to what it would be in the UK.
Mm.
And the other thing is that a lot of this law, like just taking it out of social media in general, like we spoke about when we speak about Islam, it is mostly banned, looked down upon. So I feel like social media policies are also built on that and not actually somebody challenging them. And I'm like, oh, what about criticism of Islam? And the reason is everybody's like, why is Islam on a highlight now? And I'm like, years ago, Christianity was on the highlight. Years ago, when
Mm-hmm.
Christianity was the fastest growing religion or the largest religion, that was on the highlight. You just weren't born then, or you just didn't have social media then, or there was no internet then, where it was actually being scrutinized. And this is why we have people who are atheists, majority of the people, geez, majority of the people who are atheists are from Christianity right now. And obviously that will change because moving forward, a lot of our parents will be atheists. A lot of, the future generations will probably be not religious
Mm-hmm.
or even like having a moderate Muslim background will
It's
result
funny that
in,
you bring that up, Zara.
sorry?
It's funny that you brought that up. One of the few researches that I like to point out is that with that every subsequent generation is becoming less religious, and millennials and Gen Z especially, but millennials too, are far less religious by a wide margin compared to previous generations like Gen X and baby boomers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that is definitely increasing, not just in the UK, Australia, but in the Middle East as well, and the US. I feel like US is one, like when you look at a lot of the recent searches and people are like, oh, the US is more religious, and that is not primarily Muslims, it is primarily Christianity. But at the same time, it's also because you're 300 million in terms of population. The United States is bigger. And a lot of times, like,
Zara,
because,
can I point out one thing also for you?
yeah.
So to give credence to what you're talking about, by the way, I've been watching the chat and I've watched how many trolls that are in there, and I have never seen so many trolls before on that chat until now, and all of them have non-English names in them.
Okay, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Darth Dawkins is some jerk who's a Christian religious nutbag, and he comes on my show every now and then. He's got either several accounts or several followers, and they come on. They're like, "How come you won't debate me? How come you won't debate me?"
Oh, really?
Yeah. So hold on. So we just as little amount of time wasted on this jerk as possible. So he does that, and then he comes in. He's like, "Here's my email address. Send me an email." I send him an email going, "Listen, I don't want to debate you. If you want to debate me, go away. I don't care. If you want to come on my show and be a guest and be cool and have a fun light morning show, let's do that. Respond. Otherwise, please respect me and go away." Haven't heard from him for a week and a half. He's never responded to my email. Today he pops up in the chat. How come you haven't debated me? His other little pseudonyms or little buddies, they're all doing the same thing. How come you're silencing 8 voices that aren't atheists? We know who it is. Just ignore them. We move on. There's a couple of real Muslims in there who are asking real questions. That's muddying the water. So we do have some unusual names in there. But most of those are not related to you. Sorry, miss.
Yeah, no, it's fine because somebody actually went like, "How come you've blocked people?"
That's the deal. They're talking to me.
Yeah,
How come we blocked him and his followers who keep coming in?
I also blocked a few people on Instagram in the past time that I've been talking to you. I also got a message saying, "Oi, bitch, what the fuck is your problem? Why are you defaming Islam, you motherfucker, ungrateful piece of shit, attention seeker?" And I'm like, that is exactly what I want. My profile says I want attention because I changed it day before, and I'm like, that is why I'm an activist. Why would I be on social media if I don't want people to listen to me? Like, I am, like, previously would offend me, and I'm like, I'm not an attention seeker. Otherwise, I'd be posting photos. Like, it would be easier for me to post up just selfies than to actually talk about an idea and criticize it. But at the same
True.
time, and I'm like, of course I want attention.
True.
Why would I, like, you guys prove my point for me. But what
Absolutely.
happened was that attention went to harassment. In the morning, I woke up, they harassed my boyfriend's chat, which is, again, off limits.
Mhm.
And I had to untag my family from it. I just started blocking people. They weren't good for my mental health because, one,
Absolutely.
they started, it wasn't just hatred towards me. It was hatred driven to anybody else who went like, wow, these people are hateful and shameful. And somebody went like, oh, I hope you and your kids get burnt. And I was like,
Right.
look, you can say something to me, but when you talk about our loved ones, especially children, I don't have a child, but I can only imagine if somebody told that to my mom, she would get really mama bear, even if she doesn't agree with me. Like,
Right.
even if my dad was unhappy with me removing the hijab, and he went like, maybe you shouldn't live with us when I was visiting. And my mom's like, well, if you want to leave the house, talking to my dad, you can go.
Mm.
But she's staying here. So, like, my mom she's amazing, she's strong, but at the same time, she's also like quite traditional. She expects a woman to cook for her husband. She expects a woman to be a housewife. But so I'd never taken her as a role model, but there are great things that I learned from her.
Mm.
I did my college English research or study on her. So it was more like understanding her background to how she became here and understanding what her relationship with her family was.
Right.
So I do admire her, but at the same time, like, imagine telling somebody that I hope you and your 3 kids get burnt. And I was like,
Absolutely.
wow, this person hasn't even said anything. All she said was that these people are so hateful, they end up proving your point.
Right.
And that is exactly why I'm going to block you if you start being an asshole to me, if you start harassing people, including myself. I've been added to multiple group chats without consent, and all they're talking about is bitch, bitch, bitch. And I'm like, wow, like, there is nothing valuable coming from this.
Right.
There's nothing.
All this hate and vitriol and ugliness coming from these followers of a God of mercy and peace. How's that work? How does that happen?
You have to think, like, an all-knowing, omniscient God wants you to defend him. They want people, mortal beings, to defend him. Somebody who's 15 in their rooms to defend him.
Yep.
That's shocking.
Absolutely. Real quick, I have that question for you that I've been holding on. So somebody, Iron Charioteer, asked, if the U.S. bans the hijab or burqa or niqab, will you fight for the right of Muslims based on the First Amendment and join the anti-theists? I don't know that they would ever do that. I don't know U.S. would ban the hijab. I don't know.
I think banning the niqab is very different from banning the hijab because, one, the niqab isn't even required for Islamic women, so it's not an essential part of your practice that you have to do. So they're not going in terms of offending that. So the niqab could be one for security reasons, which a lot of people think it's just, I guess, a front to be Islamophobic. But two, also, I know a lot of little girls, I was never forced into it, but like with niqab, I know a lot of little girls who wore the niqab, and it takes away your childhood. Imagine an 80-year-old who has grown up to see her mom wearing it. Fine, the adult is wearing it. But even as a mother, like, you should have some common sense to go like, nobody's going to see her face. She's a child. Like, what possibly can a child get in trouble for if she doesn't cover her face, let alone her hair?
Right.
But some people do still force it, but we're taking away their childhood. And also thinking about the psychology of other kids. They're not in university. It's not adults going like, hey, this is their choice. There's a lot of children being affected by that. There are a lot of children who see their colleague wearing a face covering, and they're like, should we, like, they're kids, like, should we respect that? Are we going to be confused, or is this how we see her? Is that all her identity is? Is it all that a woman's identity is based on what she's wearing to cover herself? Like, is that all that, like, for kids, they're not able to distinguish it. So I feel like you're stealing away the childhood for that girl. And also, in fact, you're creating a lot of, I wouldn't say a negative space, but you're creating a confusing space for younger kids. I'm sure there are other studies.
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
there are other studies being done, and that's why, if you think about it, they also have schools that operate differently. They have schools that, like
I'm actually curious about that too.
yeah,
I'm a psychology major, so that what you're talking about right there, the psychological damage that these children, I I would love to see. I mean, granted, I know it would get a lot of flack because
yeah,
a lot of people, how could you? But I would love to see a study on that. The
yeah.
psychological damage that would have on a child.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
basically where I was getting at. I'm like, they have special schools that will allow children who think differently and who have special needs to, I guess, bring some toys with them and sit with them as a comfort toy, an anxiety toy. And they, like, I was in Australia, and a colleague of mine, his mom is a therapist and she works with little kids with anxiety. So they have the special classes for them to help them cope with that. But then this is a part of somebody who is normal, does not need any extra, I guess, help for, in terms of like bringing a toy in for their anxiety, who has been told to wear it, even though at 8 years old or 9 years old, she chooses to. But at the same time, you're like, if you think about it, like you said, psychologically, what is happening, like how do other people perceive that as? And these are not adults, and this is not freedom of expression for kids. It's more around, what do they see this person as, and how is that affecting that person or that girl wearing it when her colleagues see her differently than she would like to be seen? Sometimes they just want to be seen as normal, and that's how a lot of my journey started. Like, I was in a Muslim country, so I wore a headscarf, didn't wear it, didn't care. My parents weren't there, it didn't affect me. But when I removed it, like permanently, and I posted a photo, there was a lot of rumors about it, and there were a lot of negative connotation or negative comments directed towards me. But just thinking about when I moved countries and I was trying to more understand, like, what is my identity if I'm not wearing it on my head? What does that mean? And that's when I started exploring more of who I am. I've always been a women's rights, I guess, advocate, because I was a woman in tech that was barely taken seriously by her male coworkers because I'm a woman. And they're like 10 women and
Patriarchy.
90 other men. Yeah, 90 other men. And nobody's going to listen to me because all of them are men. And then that slowly builds up my perception to, how am I going to be at work? Right? Am I going to be that person who's going to be continued to not be heard? Am I going to build up something differently? So removing such an item or wearing that can obviously help determine a lot of your identity. And with kids, it's very confusing. It is like the face bands I would be on board with, because a lot of kids are forced to wear it. But with the hijab, I feel like it's still different for kids. It still has a different connotation to it, but at least somebody can see their face and recognize them. But at the same time, if we're banning it, we're falling into the trap of controlling what women should wear. So I'm not in support of banning it. I would rather educate. And I
Yeah,
actually received an email last night about a Muslim school requiring girls to wear it. And the father emailed me saying he's kind of a Muslim, but at the same time, he doesn't want his daughter to wear it. It's like, what do I do? And I'm like, this is tricky. I don't even live in the US, but I am going to look it up. Um, but at the same time, like, I'm not going to go for banning it. I would rather schools have an age restriction on it,
Right.
going like, hey, if you're under 13, you're not allowed to wear it, or you're not required to wear it. But there are schools that would do the same thing. My school did it, where if you're in grade 4, you have to wear it. So I think
mm,
you're about 80 years old.
Yeah.
I was about 8 or 9 years old, that you had to wear it.
It's compelled.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I guess, I don't know, in a way, I felt like even those people who weren't Muslims but were in the school had to wear it as well as part of that uniform.
Yeah.
And that again is like, I guess it's a conflict between like having a choice and not giving them a choice or a part of a uniform.
hmm
I
Well,
think that's a good line that blurs right there. Like, do you or do you not have the choice? I think is dependent on where you are.
right. And the results of what happens if you don't wear it are different
Right.
based on what. Yes. We have a question. I think I understand the question. I think you've already answered this. Would you join the anti-theists if they want to protect the rights to wear head coverings or to get rid of head coverings? But you've already said you don't have a problem with a Muslim woman wearing her head covering if she wants to. Your problem lies with the people who are compelled to do or subjugated into or who are punished for not wearing.
I think I'll repeat back to like giving you an example of my sister, and I'm like, I don't have problems with women who wear it. I
Right.
can still have a problem with the tool itself. I don't have problems with people who, I guess, wear green shoes or whatnot. I do have a problem with green shoes. So there's a difference between having a problem with the people that wear it and the people and the, I guess, the symbol itself that I have a problem with, and then people who propagate it to be modest and pious and worthy of respect. I think that also sends out a message saying those who don't wear it, which was how I was raised, are not worthy of respect or are going to go to hell if they don't wear it. So I guess in terms of like banning it in the country, I would disagree with it, only because we're limiting choice. I'm not going to stop anybody from wearing it. I have a video on how to remove your hijab. And that is mostly about helping girls who have worn it. And my video clearly says that if you want to wear it, wear it. But if you're going to remove it, don't do it out of pressure for anyone. Not your friends, not your family. It should be your choice. And if you're wearing it, it should be your choice. Especially if you're watching this video, you're, I guess, adult enough or informed enough to understand what I'm saying. And my video is more about, I guess, if you're going to remove it, how do we instill that confidence in you? Because I never had it. So I feel like a lot of people are pressured into removing it and then going to wear shorts and not creating their own journey, or they feel like, or they're compelled to live up to beauty standards that are set by the media as well, and people who have never worn a hijab, which would be people who were raised with wearing shorts during summer while that person wasn't, and then they're also confused and they're like, I'm just going to stick to hijab because I'm not comfortable showing my legs. I think they think it's a black and white.
Your body, your choice, right?
Exactly. And I feel like a lot of people, because like I said, we talked about representation and this falls back into it. A lot of people, or a lot of women who dress, who have had stages of removing a hijab, were never given the option to dress differently. I guess we're never showed until recently that they can dress differently, that you don't have to wear shorts during summer, but you can wear it if you want to. And just like the simple, like what would women wear that is still modest for them because they still hold those ideas, but don't want to cover their hair. So like my video is about like, even if you can't remove the hijab, what do you do next? Like, how do you talk to your parents? But also, how can you style it in a way that if your parents don't agree, what can make you happy right now? What can we slowly do to give you that confidence to then go like, I'm not wearing this on my head. Or if I wear it, this is how I'm going to wear it, and this is what I'd like to do. So basically just teaching women to own up to their decisions.
Do you know who Linda Sarsour is?
Sarsour, yeah.
So, all right. So there's a question about what do you think about how she's using the government and the First Amendment to spread Islam? Is that, I have no idea. This is just a question from Ian Charioteer. Are you familiar with this scenario?
Yeah, so I had first heard of Linda Sarsour when I was like 20, so about 6-7 years ago. And I really liked her for being like, bold and outstanding. And then the more I listened to her, I was never one that wanted to live in a country that was Sharia law. I don't want to be stoned for adultery. So I don't want to live in a country that enforces hijab, or I don't want to live in a country that enforces any of the Islamic law that are harmful to other people. So like a requirement that people should take breaks for praying or whatnot, like as an example, you know what, if it's your break time, talk with your employer, stop getting people to accommodate to special requests, because as an atheist, I don't pray. What would does that mean that I also get the time off to do nothing? Or is it just special to people who actually are praying. I'm not entirely sure of what rules she's trying to propagate, but I don't quite like her because I have always disliked women who put other women down. And I think Linda so especially with other ex-Muslims or other women, she's trying doing that also with Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Like, if I don't have any respect for women who put other women down.
Understood.
And this is why I make a difference between hating the symbol and the idea versus women.
Okay.
I'm a champion of women who are also quite verbal about their ideas, even if we disagree on them. And I'm like, look at you, like actually putting your words out there. That is strength. But like for somebody that does not respect other women, I guess just coming from a feminist perspective, I wouldn't want people like to put them down. I'm happy for her to attack ideas of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, which are, yep, fine, do that, without actually like saying words that would, I guess without saying words, I think she said I would cut off her vagina or something for Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She actually said that, yeah.
Wow.
And Ayaan Hirsi Ali has gone through FGM as well. And I don't quite agree with Ayaan Hirsi Ali's political stance as well. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that. One, it's just demeaning. It's just demoralizing. I don't remember the last time I've called somebody a bitch.
Wow. I have
It's
another
kind of one of those issues where we have like white people getting trapped into token inclusion and not looking at what people are saying versus what's it's that false sense of inclusion, and it's a slippery slope, and it's a scary topic to even really talk about. As I said, because it's such a slippery slope, but you have to really look at what people are saying. And Zara, I mean, what I'm hearing here is holy cow. I mean, granted, this is kind of more news to me, but yikes.
Yeah, yikes. Yeah, we don't address Islam on our channel. Sorry to the person who thinks we hate on Islam all of a sudden. We don't normally. So a lot of this, we hear this stuff. People are thanking me in the chat going, hey, thank you for this because it's a break from the normal Christian stuff. But it's quite a contrast. As a matter of fact, so you're an ex-Muslim. We have a chat over here from Facebook. We've got like 35 people over on YouTube watching and about 5 on Facebook. And somebody over on Facebook has asked, could you clarify the realities? This, especially considering you're an ex-Muslim, this is probably quite pertinent. Can you clarify the realities regarding any penalties for apostasy or leaving for the Muslim faith?
So, yeah. So in terms of the Quran and the Hadith, they have spoken about if somebody turns back from Islam and doesn't come back, they should be killed. And then for a lot of countries, apostasy is also considered blasphemy, because if you ever tell somebody that you're an apostate, that means you have outrightly rejected Islam.
Okay.
And that is also considered blasphemy. So Muslim majority countries have different rules, from jail time to death penalty. We have somebody and I hope this helps, or if you guys can get the hashtag trending, it's Free Mubarak Bala. He's a humanist from Nigeria who's, as of the past 3 days, has been in the north of Nigeria. I haven't heard any news, but we were raising funds to get him a lawyer. We got the funds, and they're not going to give him access to any legal, any legal help or any law. I don't know what's happening at the moment, so maybe I'm hoping things have changed, but that is for somebody who's left it and has been a humanist in Nigeria that was captured in his house.
Okay.
So I guess a lot of the rules can depend, well, one, where you live in, but Islam's rule is quite clear, which a lot of people talk about. There's moral relativity because obviously these rules were written about 1,400 years ago. So there's some people that say that it was apostates were punished in their time because somebody had broken a treaty. And by that they mean somebody had shared stuff about Islam that wasn't what Muhammad wanted it to be.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't think death is an appropriate punishment.
Well, about your free Mubarak.
Yeah, Free Mubarak Bala.
So the American Atheist Organization contacted me a few days ago and asked me to set up a stream to talk about the Free Mubarak. I replied and I told them I'd be willing to contact me, and we'd be, so whoever it is that those people, the contacted with the American Atheists, whoever they are, have an open invite to get with me, and we'll do an afternoon stream to help drum up what we can for the Free Mubarak. Of course, I mean, this is, again, this first I've heard about more of it since then, but they've got an open invite. They've just never gotten back with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're also a lot of the organizations. See, the big part about the organization is that even if somebody donates money and we get the money, the part, like the interesting and the difficult part is actually getting them access to anything. It's like you're in a country where, cool, we can help you fly out, we can get you to a safe country, but at the same time, we actually need to get you to the airport, which they might not even have access to unless it's a big international outrage. And I feel like a lot of news that are left wing would never give a platform to us, because then we would be promoting values that are anti-Islamic because we are against blasphemy. It's a very tricky world where I feel like as humanists and atheists, we've just been shoved in a corner where we don't actually have laws that that protect us. A lot of the laws protect religion, but they don't actually protect the right for atheists to speak.
As they pointed out many times, the dangers of token inclusion.
Yeah. It's crazy that we even live in the 21st century when we have laws that protect the rights of women to drive or women to vote and whatnot. We don't have laws that protect somebody's life. It's crazy that somebody who can rape in an Islamic Sharia law will probably go to jail unless the victim marries them.
Really?
And
yeah, they still do that.
Huh? Jordan had it last, I think, and Jordan is not as high risk of a Muslim majority country, but they had it. This was a few years ago, but that was something I didn't even know until I left, and I was like, "You guys do that? Like that is a thing? Like, what are we living in?" And yet, that person has raped, and yet for free speech, somebody is being prosecuted for insulting a deity and a dead man. Like, we're talking about a big violation of human rights.
Absolutely.
And we're still not getting that platform to not only talk about it, but I feel like blasphemy laws are a big thing to threaten other people to not talk about it as well. It's not only that person.
Can I dovetail on that?
Sorry?
Can I dovetail on that, what you're talking about?
Yes, he wants to add on what you were saying. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So on Facebook, there are actually Facebook groups that we've identified and know that are these zealot Islam groups that target and seek out people who speak ill against.
Do you have those groups?
Yeah, actually, in fact, you could just put it into a search, and you could find them actually rather quick. They're large, and what they do is they look for people who speak out against Islam, and then they try to see either if they can find where they are, and especially see if they're in a majority Muslim country, and then they go after those people, especially if they have blasphemy laws.
Yeah, I've had people in the UK look for me, and I've filed police threats, and
that's where they organize a lot of them. These are large organized groups, and I've tried to see if I could, and that's the messed up thing is, we could report these things to Facebook, and Facebook doesn't do anything about it, but they are very quick to take down a post that you show a picture of Muhammad and Jesus kissing. I mean, oh boy.
Yeah,
you're in Facebook jail.
it's crazy. Ex-Muslims of North America is actually looking to fight those laws. Like I said, they have been gone unchallenged until now recently that we're actually under threat. So ex-Muslims of North America are working with politicians who understand the plight of ex-Muslims and the possible persecution they face. So they're looking for those groups and then they'll report it. And I feel like we need to like, even though like I have my judgments about Facebook and social media in general, we need to continue to keep up that fight. Like it has to go on. Sometimes I've given up and I'm like, well, I can't report this because Instagram hasn't given me an option. But at the same time, like we need to continue doing it. We need to do, like, only because rules have been set doesn't mean they can't be changed. And be it social media, I feel like the more resistance we build to being shut, the more I guess the more we'll attract to our cause.
Yeah.
But it is quite interesting that a lot of public or politicians or any public news don't really talk about Mubarak Bala or any other blasphemy laws. Asia Bibi was a really good one, which I'm glad that she's safe now, but even then, like, she always has to be under hiding. Yeah. And that she's also spent years of her life in jail and she can't get back. She can't get that time back, but also like she's not going to be the only one. Right. And I feel like blasphemy laws are more to set standards to the public than they are to punish that person. Right. It's not, that person hasn't even angered them as much as many people doing it. And that's why I am like, whether it's a Hindu god or anything, and I'm like, it is still my right to blaspheme. What is not a right is inciting violence. And that's what I meant. Some of my posts can be quite provocative, but at the same time, it is to establish the notion it is still my right of free speech. How you react to it is wrong. And how other people who react to it by, you know, basically calling Muslims terrorists is wrong. Because that's not something I've said. And I'm still going to defend the right of Muslims to be in Europe or to be in a Western country and to even speak or practice their religion. But I'm not going to tolerate the bigotry. And so, I would, yeah.
So I kid you not, I just did a quick YouTube search, and I'm gonna drop the link in the chat too. I kid you not, the one of the groups that's there, it's called Report Anti-Islamic Pages, and the Facebook title itself for their URL is facebook.com/ hold on, it's facebook.com/ please report. That's really what it is. Just please report. Facebook.com/ please report. So it sounds official too. So I found that one real quick. And it's a group designed to find people who speak out against Islam and see if they can target them.
Yeah.
And Facebook hasn't taken it down. I've known about these groups for a while.
Yeah. I just reported it. But I was looking at the admins and I looked at one of their pages and he was like, I'm a local guide at Google Maps. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah. They don't work for Google, but it's basically when you post up photos and your reviews for Google, they get you as a local guide. But that was interesting.
I'm a local guide, but whatever.
I know, I posted photos.
All right.
Hey guys, we've been doing nearly 2 whole hours. I mean, it was just such a wonderful time. If I'd have known we were going this long, I'd have offered you a break at 1 hour, and I'd yeah. So, but thank you. I want to say thank you to both of you. What a fascinating story. I hope you stay safe, Ms. Zara.
Yeah. I definitely think you should have other ex-Muslims. I feel like they would contribute to a different perspective than mine.
Well, I don't know many, but I bet I know somebody who might could connect me with some.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to. I can just tag a few people on my post and then
start the death threats headed my way. I understand. I see how you are. Share the death threats.
I actually got one. I got an email just today with having a threat. So get used to it, Chris.
Yes, get used to it. Feel the love.
The more you do it, Zara's there. She knows what it's like.
Yep.
All right, well, I thank you again, both of you. Daniel, thank you for joining me today. Miss Zara, thank you. And you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. Thank you to everybody in the chat. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Miss Zara.
No, all good. I was going to say bye.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, everybody, don't forget, you don't have neither one of you guys have Facebook pages, do you?
I don't have a page. I have, you can follow my page.
Okay. Are YouTube? Neither one of you YouTube?
I have YouTube. I am going to do more of it.
Okay. I'll get a link from you and I'll put it down there in my description for
Perfect.
people who want to go subscribe to you on YouTube.
Perfect.
And, we'll do the thing. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you everybody in the chat. Thank you to my co-host, and stay safe, Missouri. Y'all take care.
Fantastic.